Chapter 15 of Gulliver of Mars by Edwin L. Arnold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James Christopher. Gulliver of Mars, Chapter 15. The dark forest seemed to shut behind as I entered the gateway of the deserted hither town, against which my woodcutter friend had warned me, while inside the soft mist hung in the starlight like grey drapery hung over endless vistas of ruins. What was I to do? Without all was black and cheerless. Inside there was at least shelter. Wet and cold, my courage was not about to be put down by the stories of a silly savage. I would go on, whatever happened. Besides, the soft sound of crying, now apparently all about, seemed companionable, and I had heard so much of ghosts of late, the sharp edge of fear at their presence was wearing off. So in I went, up a broad decayed street, its flagstones heaved everywhere by the roots of gnarled trees, and finding nothing save ruin, tried to rest under a wall. But the night air was chilly and the shelter poor, so out I came again, with the wailing in the shadows so close about now that I stopped, and mustering up courage called aloud, "Hello, you who weep there in the dark! Are you living or dead?" And after a minute from the hollows of the empty hearths around came the sad little responsive echo, "Are you living or dead?" It was very delusive and unsatisfactory, and I was wondering what to do next, when a slant of warmer wind came up behind me under the mist, and immediately little tongues of blue flame blossomed without visible cause in every darksome crevice, pale flickers of miasmic light rising pallid from every lurking nook and corner in the black desolation, as though 1,000 lamps were lit by unseen fingers, and knee-high, floated out into the thoroughfare where they oscillated gently in airy grace, and then, forming into procession, began drifting before the tepid air towards the city's centre. At once I thought of what the woodcutter had seen, but was too wet and sulky by this time to care. The fascination of the place was on me, and dropping into the rear of the march, I went forward with it. By this time the wailing had stopped, though now and then it seemed a dark form moved in the empty doorways on either hand, while the mist, parting into gossamers before the wind, took marvellously human forms in every alley and lane we passed. Thus I, a sodden giant, led by those elfin torches, paced through the city until we came to an open square with a great lumber of ruins in the centre, all marred and spoiled by vegetation. And here the lights wavered and went out by scores and hundreds, just as the petals drop from spent flowers, while it seemed, though it may have been only wind in the rank grass, that the air was full of most plaintive sighs as each little lamp slipped into oblivion. The big pile was a mass of fallen masonry, which, from the broken pillars all about, might have been a palace or temple once. I pushed in, but it was as dark as Hades here, so after struggling for a time in a labyrinth of chambers, chose a sandy recess, with some dry herbage by way of bedding in a corner, and there, thankful at least for shelter, my night's wanderings came to an end and I coiled myself down, ate a last handful of dried fruit, and strange as it may seem, was soon sleeping peacefully. I dreamed that night that a woman, with a face as white as ivory, came and bent over me. She led a babe by either hand, while before her were scores of other ones, with lovely faces, but all as pale as the stars themselves, who looked inside, but said nothing, and when they had stared their fill, dropped out one by one, leaving a wonderful blank in the monotony where they had been, but beyond that dream nothing happened. It was a fine morning when I woke again, and obviously broad day outside, the sunshine coming down through the cracks in the old palace roof, and lying in golden pools on the floor with dazzling effect. Rubbing my eyes and sitting up, it took me some time to get my senses together, and at first an uneasy feeling possessed me that I was somehow dematerialized in an unreal world. But a twinge of cramp in my left arm, and a healthy sneeze, which frightened a score of bats overhead nearly out of their senses, was reassuring on this point, and rubbing away the cramp and staggering to my feet, I looked about at the strange surroundings. It was cavernous chaos on every side, magnificent architecture reduced to the confusion of a debris heap, only the hollow chambers being here and there preserved by massive columns meeting overhead. Into these the yellow light filtered wherever a rent in a cupola or side wall admitted it, and allured by the vision of corridors one beyond the other, I presently set off on a tour of discovery. 20 minutes scrambling brought me to a place where the fallen jambs of a fine doorway lay so close together that there was barely room to pass between them. However, seeing light beyond, I squeezed through, and found myself in the best preserved chamber of all, a wide, roomy hall with a domed roof, a haze of mural paintings on the walls, and a marble floor nearly hidden in a century of fallen dust. I stumbled over something at the threshold, and picking it up, found it was a baby's skull, and there were more of them now that my eyes became accustomed to the light. The whole floor was mottled with them, scores and hundreds of bones and these poor little relics of humanity jutting out of the sand everywhere. In the hush of that great dead nursery, the little white trophy seemed inexpressibly pathetic, and I should have turned back reverently from that chamber of forgotten sorrows, but that something caught my eye in the centre of it. It was an oblong pile of white stone, very ill used and chipped, wrist deep in dust, yet when a slant of light came in from above and fell straight upon it, the marble against the black gloom beyond blazed like living pearl. It was dazzling, and shading my eyes and going tenderly over the poor dead babes, I looked, and there, full in the shine, lay a woman's skeleton, still wrapped in a robe of which little was left save the hard gold embroidery. Her brown hair, wonderful to say, still lay like lank dead seaweed about her, and amongst it was a fillet crown of plain iron set with gems such as I never looked upon before. There were not many, but enough to make the proud simplicity of that circlet glisten like a little band of fire, a gleaming halo on her dead forehead infinitely fascinating. At her sides were two other little bleached human flowers, and I stood before them for a long time in silent sympathy. Could this be Queen Yang, of whom the woodcutter had told me? It must be. Who else? And if it were, what strange chance had brought me here, a stranger, yet the first to come, since her sorrow, from her distant kindred? And if it were, then that fillet belonged of right to Heru, the last representative of her kind. Ought I not to take it to her rather than leave it as spoil to the first idle thief with pluck enough to deride the mysteries of the haunted city? Long time I thought over it in the faint, heavy atmosphere of that hall, and then, very gently, unwound the hair, lifted the circlet, and scarcely knowing what I did, put it in my shoulder bag. After that I went more cheerfully into the outside sunshine, and setting my clothes to dry on a stone, took stock of the situation. The place was, perhaps, not quite so romantic by day as by night, and the scattered trees, matted by creepers, with which the whole were overgrown, prevented anything like an extensive view of the ruined city being obtained. But what gave me great satisfaction was to note over these trees to the eastward a two-humped mountain, not more than 6 or 7 miles distant, the very one I had mislaid the day before. Here was reality, and a chance of getting back to civilization. I was as glad as if home were in sight, and not, perhaps, the less so because the hill meant villages and food. And you who have doubtless lunched well and lately will please bear in mind I had had nothing since breakfast the day before, and though this may look picturesque on paper, in practice it is a painful item in one's programme. Well, I gave my damp clothes but a turn or two more in the sun, and then arguing that from the bare ground where the forest ended halfway up the hill a wide view would be obtained, hurried into my garments and set off thither right gleefully. A turn or two down the blank streets, now prosaic enough, an easy scramble through a gap in the crumbling battlements, and there was the open forest again, with a friendly path well marked by the passage of those wild animals who made the city their lair trending towards my landmark. A light breakfast of soft green nuts plucked on the way, and then the ground began to bend upwards and the woods to thin a little. With infinite ardour, just before midday, I scrambled on to a bare knoll on the very hillside, and fell exhausted before the top could be reached. But what were hunger and fatigue to the satisfaction of that moment? There was the sea before me, the clear, strong, gracious sea, blue leagues of it, furrowed by the white ridges of some distant storm. I could smell the scent of it even here, and my sailor heart rose in pride at the companionship of that alien ocean. Lovely and blessed thing! How often have I turned from the shallow trivialities of the land, and found consolation in the strength of your stately solitudes! How often have I turned from the tinselled presence of the shore, the infinite pretensions of dry land that made life a sorry hectic sham, and found in the black bosom of the great mother solace and comfort. Dear lovely sea, man, half of every sphere, as far removed in the sequence of your strong emotions from the painted fripperies of the womenland as pole from pole, the grateful blessings of the humblest of your followers on you. The mere sight of salt water did me good. Heaven knows our separation had not been long, and many an unkind slap has the mother given me in the bygone, yet the mere sight of her was tonic, the lethe of troubles,